Feminism, Literary Theory and Practice, presented by Hanan Muzaffar. This is part of a series of lectures on schools of literary theory and their application to literature. Both theory and application are taken from Rivkin and Ryan's Anthology to Literary Theory, with the article on Shakespeare's King Lear used for the application. The presentation is enhanced with scenes from the 1975 BBC production of the play. Reading King Lear and watching the BBC production before starting the lecture would be beneficial. Feminist literary criticism emerged as a response to the exclusion and distortion of women's voices in literature and culture. It challenges the way literary texts and traditions have been shaped by patriarchal structures that present male experiences as universal. Over time, feminist theory has expanded to engage with race, class, sexuality, language, and psychoanalysis. It not only asks whose voices literature includes, but also how identity, power, and meaning are constructed, contested, and destabilized within texts. At its core, feminism interrogates whose stories are told, whose voices are silenced, and what ideologies are reinforced. This presentation traces the development of feminist criticism and offers a feminist and queer reading of Shakespeare's King Lear, revealing how the play exposes the fragility of authority, the tension between loyalty and voice, and the instability of gendered power. Feminist criticism formally crystallized during the 1960s and 70s women movement, but traces its intellectual roots to earlier figures such as Virginia Woolf. It initially sought to document women's historical oppression and challenge the gendered exclusions within traditional literary culture. Over time, it expanded by engaging with fields like psychoanalysis, Marxism, post-structuralism, ethnic studies, post-colonial studies, and queer theory, continuously broadening its critical reach. Internal tensions shaped its growth. Feminists debated whether to seek equality with men by entering existing systems or to emphasize difference and alternative value systems. These tensions between equality versus difference, essentialism versus constructionism, ensured that feminist criticism evolved from a solidarity movement into a rich, complex field. Early feminist critics exposed how patriarchal systems marginalized and silenced women's voices across literature and culture. Critics like Adrienne Rich, Germaine Greer, and Kate Millett highlighted how women's lives and contributions had been omitted or distorted in dominant narratives. They raised the fundamental question: is woman a shared biological essence or a historical and cultural construction? Before grappling fully with this complexity, feminist critics turned face to the urgent task of reclaiming women's lost literary heritage. One of feminist criticism's first major goals was to challenge the male-centered literary canon and reinsert women's voices into literary history. Feminists revealed how the canon largely reflected male experiences as universal, ignoring or misrepresenting women's lives. Elaine Showalter recovered a tradition of women's writings in a literature of their own. Judith Fetterly exposed distortions of women's experiences in male-authored texts in The Resisting Reader. Gilbert and Gobar, in The Madwoman in the Attic, showed how women writers resisted and subverted male literary models. Recovery efforts also uncovered marginalized women's genres like diaries, letters, and sentimental fiction. These discoveries eventually revealed the need to confront exclusions based not only on gender, but also on race and sexuality. Feminist criticism soon expanded beyond its early focus on white, heterosexual women, turning towards a more intersectional approach. African American feminist scholars like Mary Helen Washington and Bell Hooks exposed the racial blind spots of earlier feminism. Lesbian critics such as Bonnie Zimmerman and Susan Griffin challenged the heteronormative assumptions baked into literary traditions. This shift made feminist criticism more attentive to the intersections of race, gender, sexuality, and class. As feminism confronted its own blind spots, deeper theoretical debates emerged about the very nature of gender and identity. By the mid-1980s, feminist theory was grappling with a new divide between essentialist and constructionist views of gender identity. Essentialist feminists emphasized women's unique biological and psychological traits like nurturing and nonviolence, often drawing on thinkers like Luce Irigaray. Ellen Sixou introduced the idea of écriture féminine, a feminine style of writing that disrupted traditional male-dominated rationalism. On the other side, constructionist feminists argued that gender itself is a cultural creation, not an innate trait, inspired by Marxism and post-structural thinkers like Althusser. Judith Butler and Susan Jeffords introduced concepts like performativity and gender masquerade, challenging fixed notions of identity. Psychoanalysis offered feminist critics a powerful framework for analyzing identity, though it remained controversial. Kate Millett critiqued Freud's emphasis on patriarchal structures and male-centered development. Juliet Mitchell, in contrast, saw psychoanalysis as a way to understand how family and psychic life shape gender norms. Feminist critics redirected focus from the Erbel model of maternal relationships, exploring how attachment and separation inform identity. Language and the unconscious became key sites for contesting patriarchal meaning and imagining alternative modes of expression. Feminist theorists interrogated how language itself, shaped historically by male-dominated perspectives, constrains women's ability to represent their experiences. They questioned whether speaking for marginalized others could unintentionally replicate patterns of silence. Amplifying diverse voices became a key ethical and political concern for feminist criticism. This focus naturally intersected with the emerging fields of gender and queer studies, where identity and language were also seen as unstable and constructed. Gender and queer studies broadened the feminist project, challenging fixed sexual and gender categories. The Stonewall Riot of 1969 marked a critical moment in questioning the dominance of heterosexual norms. Scholars like Gay Rubin and Michel Foucault demonstrated how sexuality and gender are historically constructed rather than natural facts. Early gay and lesbian studies recovered erased queer histories and reframed literature through non-heteronormative lenses. The scholarship expanded feminist criticism's scope and pushed it towards even greater reflexivity and inclusivity. Emerging out of AIDS activism and critical theory, queer theory challenged all stable categories of identity. It reclaimed queer as a term of critical pride and analysis. Queer theorists revealed that even normal heterosexuality is socially constructed and unstable. Feminist, gender, and queer criticism today remains dynamic, continually questioning assumptions and expanding literary studies boundaries. Michael Ryan's essay, Queer Lear, A Gender Reading of King Lear, examines how King Lear contains a hidden queer subtext beneath its public narrative. He argues that Shakespeare weaves coded references to male love, fluid gender roles, and critiques of rigid heteronormativity into the play. The original performance for King James, an openly queer monarch, suggests that the play was crafted to flatter and subtly amuse its royal audience. Characters like Kent, Edgar, and the Fool offer models of male intimacy and solidarity that resist heterosexual norms. Shakespeare embeds these themes beneath a surface of traditional gender roles to maintain public decorum. The play thus becomes a double-voiced text, a visible tragedy of kingship and a hidden challenge to heteronormative structures. These tensions begin to emerge in how the play binds gender, loyalty, and authority, and how resistance to expected performances exposes their fragility. Feminist criticism reveals how King Lear ties loyalty, inheritance, and authority to rigid gendered structures. Women's speech is valued only when it displays obedience and public performance. That reinforces patriarchal expectations. Cordelia's refusal to express her love begins to destabilize this ritualized system and is seen as an act of defiance. Even Kent, Lear's most loyal male advisor, is punished when he speaks honestly instead of performing deference, begging Lear to check his hideous rashness.
Well, Lear, whom I have ever honoured as my king, loved as my father, as my master, followed as my great patron, thought on in my
The bow is bent and drawn, make from the shaft.
Fall rather, though the fork invade the region of my heart. Be Kent unmannerly when Lear is mad. What wouldst thou do, old man? Dost think that duty shall have dread to speak when power to flattery bows? To plainness honour's bound when majesty falls to folly. Reserve thy state, and in thy best consideration check thy hideous rashness. Answer my life, my judgment, thy youngest daughter does not love thee least, nor are they empty-hearted whose low sounds reverb no hollowness.
Kent, on thy life no more.
My life I ever held but as a pawn to wage against thine enemies, nor fear to lose it, thy safety being motive.
Out of my sight.
Hence, refusal to flatter, in spite of Lear's repeated "no more" and "out of my sight," like Cordelia's refusal earlier, shows that truthful speech becomes a threat within a patriarchal system. Queer readings reveal that beneath the rituals of loyalty and love lies a fragile performative order, vulnerable to collapse when not properly staged. Cordelia's refusal to perform sets the stage for a deeper collapse, where Goneril and Regan, through performance and betrayal, fully expose the fragility of Lear's authority. By Act 4, Lear's world of ritualized family loyalty and patriarchal authority has collapsed, unraveling both political control and personal identity. No longer able to command obedience, Lear loses his authority and struggles even to recognize himself or those around him, not even knowing what to say.
I know not what to say. I will not swear. These are my hands. Let's see. Feel a pin prick. Would I were assured of my condition.
Look upon me, sir, and hold your hand in benediction o'er me. No, sir, you must not kneel.
Pray do not mock me. I am a very foolish, fond old man, 80 and upward. Not an hour more nor less. And to deal plainly, I fear I am not in my perfect mind. Methinks I should know you, and know this man. Yet I am doubtful, for I am mainly ignorant what place this is. All the strength I have remembers not these garments, nor I know not where I did lodge last night. Do not laugh at me, but as I am a man, I think this lady to be my child, Cordelia.
In this moment, Lear's identity is stripped bare. He knows himself to be not in his perfect mind. Cordelia's presence, gentle, forgiving, unperformative, holding his hand, stands in stark contrast to the earlier demands for ritualized speech and authority. His authority has dissolved, and it is through vulnerability, not power, that true human connection becomes possible. Feminist readings highlight how this reversal exposes the fragility of gendered structures of dominance, revealing dependence, need, and relational ethics where hierarchy once stood. King Lear's collapse shows that authority, loyalty, and identity are not fixed by power or gender roles. They are fragile, shifting, and ultimately rebuilt through vulnerability and human connection. In conclusion, feminist literary criticism has evolved from a project of recovery and canon revision into a dynamic field that engages race, class, sexuality, language, psychoanalysis, and queer theory. Early feminist critics challenged the exclusion of women's voices and exposed the structures of oppression embedded in literary traditions. Debates over essentialism and constructionism and the rise of intersectionality enriched feminist theory's complexity. Later developments in gender and queer studies further destabilized fixed identities and categories. In King Lear, feminist and queer readings reveal how rigid structures of authority and gender collapse under pressure, making space for vulnerability and relational ethics. Literature becomes a site not of timeless truths, but of shifting performances, contestations, and possibilities for transformation. Feminist criticism remains vital for challenging inherited norms, recovering suppressed histories, and reimagining literature's place in social change. Thank you for your attention.